Surprise, everyone. I successfully transferred the baby, so she's asleep. Stick around today at lunch. I went to the Benefit. Oh, fun. What is it? Anything cool? How's the winter storm victor's break? That's a great question. How is everyone in the middle of the country who's dealing with all that? We are a bit like you, Isabella. We're very tired, but surviving. She's asleep, which is nice. I'm awake, which is whatever. But book club is great, so we take it. You know, is what it is, right? Morning, Ray. Morning, Jen. How's everyone doing? I'm making coffee, just like I do at this time every morning. Just waiting for the milk to froth, and then we'll get to reading in just a second. If anyone has any questions while we're waiting, I did add the book. There it is. This is what we are reading. Welcome to it. I don't remember what chapter we're on, but I will tell you momentarily. Secret husband has to go in the office. Not every day, but 3 days a week. Yeah, that shirt color. Oh, thank you. This shirt was a gift from my sister-in-law. She got myself, her wife, and her all matching shirts when we all went to Wicked together, which was really sweet. Very, very sweet. She's really lovely, actually. A really, really lovely sister-in-law to have. Not because she got me a Wicked shirt, but just in general. And I got them... we didn't know we got each other Wicked stuff, but I got them scenery bows, which are things made from pieces of different theater sets, and I got them matching Wicked bows to go to the show. So we all had matching Wicked stuff, you know, which is sweet. Yeah, it's better than 5, but it's not great. It's better than 5, but it's not great. One of the biggest sucky parts, other than missing him, is that we had to buy, well, we're trying to buy another car because we were sharing a car, you know. So let's go ahead and put you guys, oh guys, I finally have a phone case again, which is thrilling because it means my phone is safe from the tiny human, among other issues. I'll put her over there so I can see her. We'll grab our book. Let's see how much we can get through before she wakes up, am I right? I'll get myself a couple of sips of coffee in me so that I can survive this day. She seems pretty asleep, so. All right, delightful. So, we did stop not in the middle of a scene, but in the middle of a chapter yesterday because she was having a moment, but because it wasn't the middle of a scene, I think it was an okay breaking point, and we'll finish that now and then we'll read the next chapter. So for those keeping track, we're on page 98, and we are finishing up chapter 4, and then we will read chapter 5 momentarily here. So, new scene. Is everything okay, Bristol? Barry asked one morning before breakfast. Yeah, everything's fine. Bristol was quick to respond. Well, why? Why do you ask? Oh, no reason, he said with a smile. You've just seemed a little tense lately, and I noticed you haven't been spending as much time at the Home for the Hopeless as you usually do. Is there anything that you need to talk about? Oh, you know what? I just decided to take a little break, she said. Something happened, nothing serious, of course, but I thought a little distance would be helpful. It would give me a chance to think about things and figure out what I want to do next. Figure out what to do next? Barry asked with a concern. All right, now you have to tell me what's going on so that my imagination doesn't fill in the blanks. Bristol was so exhausted from worrying that she didn't have the energy to put on a show, so she told her brother a story that was as close to the truth as possible without giving anything away. Well, I recently discovered something about myself that's a little hard to live with, she said. Barry's eyes grew large. And what is that? Well, I'm not sure I like charity anymore. Barry had to do a double take at his sister's odd response. You've been tense because you don't like charity anymore? Yes? Bristol said with a shrug, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to hide it. Now that I know, I'm afraid other people are going to find out too, and I'm afraid what might happen if I'm ever exposed. Exposed? But Bristol, disliking charity isn't illegal. I mean, it's just a preference. I know, but it practically is a crime, she exclaimed. The whole world's very cruel to people who don't like charity, but that's just because they're misunderstood. Society thinks disliking charity is the same thing as disliking kindness, when in reality, disliking charity and disliking kindness are very, very different things. Oh, Barry, I really wish I could tell you how different they are, because it's truly fascinating. One of the greatest misconceptions of our time, really. According to the expression on her brother's face, he might have been less concerned if she had just told him the truth. Honestly, she probably should have just told him the truth because she sounds like a lunatic right now. This is an insane statement, Bristol. What a ridiculous thing to say. I don't like charity, and that's not the same thing as not liking kindness. Okay. Barry was looking at his sister like she was on the verge of a mental breakdown, and to be fair, she really was. So how long have you disliked charity? He asked. Almost a week, she said. And do you remember the incident that changed your mind? Oh, yes. It all started when I accidentally covered a room with flowers, she said, forgetting to alter her story. Oh, I mean, there was a homeless woman who was feeling ill, so I filled her room with flowers to cheer her up, but it was the wrong room, a room that I honestly had no business being in, and so I threw all the flowers away before anybody caught me. Right, Barry said. But prior to that moment, you had never disliked charity before, had you? No, not at all, she said. Before that, I didn't think I was even capable of disliking charity. Okay, then that settles that, he said. You just had a bad day, and you should never let one bad day change who you are. We can never be certain about anything in life, especially if we only experience it one time. We can't? Bristol asked with hopeful eyes. No, of course not, Barry said. If I were you, I would go back to the Home for the Hopeless and give charity another try to make sure that you genuinely dislike it. And then, and only then, would I worry about even being exposed for it. Although her brother had no idea what was really bothering her, Bristol thought he had given her excellent advice. After all, it did take more than one trip on a boat to find out that someone was a sailor. Maybe magic was similar. Perhaps it would take years of practice before she had to worry about her life really being in danger. And like Barry suggested, there was always the chance the ordeal had been a fluke and it would never happen again. Right or wrong, for her own sanity, Bristol had to find out. The following night, after she finished cleaning the library, Bristol returned to the Justice's private library on the second floor. She put her reading glasses on, she retrieved The Truth About Magic by Celeste Weatherbury from the shelf, and she turned to the page with ancient text. After a deep breath and a silent prayer, she read the incantation aloud to prove whether or not she was a fairy once and for all. El Sune, El Kanun, El Lakane Aname, Del Mune, Dalmun, Akatele, Akanaman. Bristol was afraid to look, and she covered her eyes. At first, she didn't feel or hear anything, so she peeked at the room through her fingers. Nothing appeared to have changed in the slightest. Oh, Bristol's spirits began to soar. She watched the walls with bated breath, waiting for the flowers to materialize again. but they never came. Tears filled her eyes and she let out a sigh of relief, turning into a long and thankful laugh. Fairy was right, she said. We should never let one day change who we... And then suddenly, the pages of The Truth About Magic started to glow. Bright orbs of white light rose from the book and filled the dark room. As the orbs spread out, they became smaller and smaller, creating the illusion of depth in every direction. And soon, the private library resembled a limitless galaxy. Bristol got to her feet and looked around the room in amazement. Not only had she confirmed the magic in her veins, but she never imagined she was capable of creating such a beautiful sight. The magic was transcendent, and Bristol forgot where she was. She didn't feel like she was standing in the private library anymore, but floating through her own starry universe. Miss Bailey, what in the name of champion are you doing? The voice startled Bristol, and all the orbs throughout the room instantly vanished. When her eyes adjusted, Bristol saw the metal door had swung open without her noticing, and Mr. Woolsore was standing in the doorway with 2 armed guards. All 3 men were staring at her like she was the foulest creature they had ever seen, and I just got goosebumps. Yikes. That's the girl that I've been warning you about, Mr. Woolsore shouted, and he pointed a shaky finger at her. I've been telling you for months that she was up to something, but none of you believed me. You said that I was mad for believing a young girl was capable of such things. Now, look, we have a witch that we caught in the act. Mr. Woolsore, Bristol said. Wait, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Save your lies, you for the justices, you witch. You've been caught red-handed. The librarian yelled and then turned toward the guards. Don't just stand there. Seize her before she casts another spell. Bristol had imagined many scenarios where she might be caught in the justice's private library, but she never imagined that it would happen while she was conjuring magic. I like how my niece just woke and wanted me right when, of course, that's always how it goes, right, Naisa? Before she had the chance to defend herself any further, the guards charged toward her and forcefully grabbed her by the arms. No, you don't understand, she pleaded. I'm not a witch. Please, I beg you, let me prove it. And as the guards dragged Bristol out of the room, Mr. Woolsore snatched the reading glasses off of her face and snapped them in 2. You won't be needing these where you're going, he said. Take her away. Horrific. Not cute. Not good. My mother-in-law is in the bathroom showering, but I think she took a phone call. I don't think she realizes how close she is to the baby's room, and I'm crossing my fingers that her talking on the phone does not wake that baby up. Cross your fingers, because I can hear her from here, so I'm hoping the baby can't hear her in the room. Don't wake up, baby, no. All right, Chapter 5, Trial by Family. That does not sound good. And here we go. For the first time, Bristol understood what it was like to be scared senseless. There were heavy shackles around her wrists, but she didn't feel them. The smell of decaying rats and mildew filled the air, but it didn't bother her. Blood-curdling screams of prisoners getting whipped echoed through the halls, but she hardly noticed them. Her eyes were fixated on the steel bars surrounding her, but she didn't even understand what she was looking at. She was sitting straight up on the edge of the stone bench in her prisoner cell, and she hadn't moved a muscle since she was placed there. Everything happened so fast the night before that she couldn't remember where she was or how she got there. Then again, she was in such a state of shock that she could barely think at all. At dawn, the ear-piercing cathedral bells didn't even make Bristol flinch. It was now morning after the worst night of her life, and she had no concept of time. Her mind was completely blank, her body was completely still, and as far as she was concerned, the world had stopped spinning. Her cell door swung open, and a prison guard stepped inside, but his arrival didn't break her petrified trance.
Your deputy defense justice has arrived, the guard said. After hearing this, Bristol was finally able to make sense of where she was and what had happened. She, Bristol Evergreen, had been imprisoned for a crime. She was sitting in the prison deep below the Chariot Hills courthouse, and the deputy justice assigned to defend her had come to speak with her about the pending trial. The guard stepped inside, and a tall young man in a black hat and a gray and black checkered robe entered the cell. When Bristol gazed up at the deputy justice, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. "Brooks?" she said. Her eldest brother froze after taking his first steps into the prison cell. His eyes went wide and his face grew pale at the sight of his sister in chains. "Bristol?" he gasped. The Evergreen siblings stared at each other for a full minute without saying a single word. It was the only time in Bristol's life that she had ever been genuinely pleased to see her brother, but the pleasure quickly faded as she realized why he was here. Brooks was going to defend her in court? Brooks, Listen, Bristol tried to break the silence, but she was at a loss for words. "Do you two know each other?" the guard asked suspiciously, and Brooks stared at his sister. The disbelief in his eyes changed into a very serious and urgent expression. He raised his index finger to his mouth, imploring her to be quiet. Bristol didn't understand why the silence was necessary, but she obliged. We're acquainted," Brooks told the guard behind him. "She's one of the many schoolgirls who admire me, but honestly, who can blame her?" Her brother's charade was confusing. She knew it was perfectly legal for deputy justices to defend family members on trial, so why was he pretending that they weren't related? Brooks opened his briefcase and retrieved a quill and a piece of parchment. He scribbled a quick note on the paper, folded it, and handed it to the guard. I need you to deliver this message to Justice Evergreen's office on the 4th floor," Brooks instructed. "I was just reminded of something involving another case that needs to be addressed immediately." "Sir, I can't leave you alone with a prisoner," the guard replied. "Don't insult me. This girl's hardly a physical threat." The note, however, regards a very serious and timely matter. Justice Evergreen will want this message right away, and if your reluctance jeopardizes this case, well, I'll make sure he knows that you're the one who caused the delay. Obviously, the guard did not appreciate being ordered around. He glared at Brooks and then begrudgingly headed to the 4th floor with the note in hand, slamming his cell door behind him. Brooks turned to Bristol, and the disbelief returned to his face. "My God, Bristol, what the hell have you gotten yourself into?" he exclaimed. "1 count of trespassing, 1 count of female literacy, and 1 count of committing magic? Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Bristol looked at the floor and shook her head. I don't know what to say," she said softly. "This all feels like a bad dream." "When you weren't at breakfast this morning, Mother assumed you'd gone to the Home for the Hopeless to volunteer before school," Brooks said. "When I got to the courthouse, all the deputy justices were talking about the witch that got caught in the library last night. I didn't put the two together. I never imagined in a million years the witch would be my own sister." "But I'm not a witch," Bristol exclaimed. "The banned book that I was reading, it explains everything. Please, you have to find it, and you have to show it to—" "Are you mad?" Brooks asked. "I can't use a banned book as evidence." "Then what are you going to use for my defense?" Bristol asked. "Defense?" Brooks said as he was appalled by her choice of words. "Bristol, you were caught by 3 witnesses. There's no defense for you. You're facing life imprisonment with hard labor for committing magic alone. That's without the trespassing and the female literacy on top of it. You're going to be lucky if you make it out of here alive." "You mean they might execute me?" Bristol felt like a cold hand had suddenly reached into her body and ripped out her stomach. She had willingly gone down a long path of mistakes that she never thought would lead to this. She started hyperventilating. No, this can't be happening. You can't let them execute me, please. Brooks, you have to help me. I'm your sister." Brooks rolled his eyes at the remark. "Oh, yeah, and what a joy of a sister you've been," he said spitefully. "I'm afraid even with my superb defense skills, my hands are tied." "There has to be something we can do." Her brother went quiet, and he bit his nails as he thought about it. There's only one thing I could possibly think that would help you now." "What?" "Father." Brooks said it like it was good news, but it only made Bristol feel more hopeless than before. Her father was the last person on the planet she expected to save her. "Father isn't going to help me," she said. "When he finds out what I've done, he'll want to kill me himself." "Yeah, well, you're right about that," Brooks scoffed. Father may not value your life, but he does think very highly of his own reputation. He would do anything to preserve his reputation, and nothing's going to tarnish his name more than one of his children getting arrested and sentenced to death. Lucky for him, I'm the only one who knows you're here right now. How? Well, as far as anyone knows, this is the case of Bailey versus the Southern Kingdom. The charges have been filed under the alias that you gave the library. When Father gets my note and realizes you're the one on trial, he's going to do whatever he can to sweep this case under the rug before his colleagues find out about it. But what if he doesn't? Bristol asked. Father can't be my only chance for survival. Well, then it all depends on your trial, Brooks exclaimed. First, the prosecution deputy will present your charges to the sitting justice and recommend a penalty, and if they recommend the minimum penalty, the justice will likely sentence you to life imprisonment with hard labor. But if the deputy justice recommends the maximum penalty, I guarantee the justice will sentence you to capital punishment. But the sitting justice doesn't have to take the recommendation. It's just a suggestion, Bristol recalled from what she had read. Even if the prosecution deputy recommends the maximum penalty, the justice could still be merciful. Brooks' face fell flat, and Bristol knew there was something he wasn't telling her. There won't be any mercy this time, he said. Your trial is being overseen by Justice Olagrade. Who? Justice Olagrade is the most despised justice in the whole court system. He has a god complex, and he's notorious for condemning people to death whenever possible. Even when prosecution deputies recommend the minimum penalty, Olagrade likes to bully them into recommending the maximum penalty just so he can enforce it. Oh my gosh, Bristol gasped. Yeah, it gets worse, Brooks went on. Olagrade has hated Father since their days at the University of Law. During their time as deputy justice, his father never lost a case against Olagrade, and he would humiliate him during the trials. That's the reason he assigned me to your defense. It's impossible for a deputy justice to win a case like this when he wants to watch an evergreen lose. The Olagrade would be thrilled to sentence you to death if he had the chance. Bristol couldn't believe her misfortune. She was getting punished not only by the laws of the Southern Kingdom, but also apparently by the universe itself. Then I'm doomed, she said quietly. There's just no way around it. There's still one thing in our favor that you're forgetting, Brooks reminded her. Like I said, as far as anyone knows, this is the case of Bailey versus the Southern Kingdom. Justice Olagrade doesn't know who you are. Trials usually don't begin until a day or two after incarceration, so hopefully that'll give Father enough time to help you before Olagrade finds out. So that's why you pretended we weren't related in front of the guard. You didn't want anyone to realize who I am? Yeah, exactly. Bristol never thought the day would come when she was thankful for having a brother like Brooks, but here it was. All the calculating and mischievous qualities she resented in him were now tools he was using to save her life. I'm so scared, Brooks. Well, you should be, he said. Even if Father finds a way to help you, you aren't going to walk out of here freely. Best case scenario, you'll probably spend the rest of your life in prison far away from Chariot Hills. I suppose you think I deserve it for being so stupid, she said through tears. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just want life to be different. Well, I guess you got what you asked for. The door swung open and the guard returned to the cell. He was wheezing and sweating profusely from his journey to the 4th floor. I delivered your message to the justice, sir, the guard grumbled. Yeah, just in time, too. I'm all finished here. Brooks then picked up his briefcase and headed for the door, but Bristol stopped him as he stepped into the hall. Deputy Justice Evergreen, she asked, if you happen to see them, will you please give my mother and my brother my love, and tell them I'm really sorry for all of this? Her brother gave the slightest nod possible without attracting the guard's attention. Yeah, I'm not your messenger, criminal, he said dramatically. See you in court. Brooks continued down the hall, and the guard followed, locking the doors of the cell behind him. And as the sound of their footsteps faded, Bristol was consumed by the most extreme sorrow that she had ever felt. She lay on top of a stone bench and wept until there wasn't a teardrop left inside of her. As far as she knew, her brother was the last piece of home she would ever see. That's so sad. So sad. But new scene anyway. That night, Bristol was jolted awake when her cell door suddenly burst open. 2 prison guards charged inside and grabbed her by the arms and forced her to her feet. Without saying a word, the guards rushed Bristol out of her cell and raced across the prison, and then they hurried up a spiral staircase. They moved at such a frantic pace that Bristol had trouble keeping up, and she was dragged the majority of the way. She had no idea what was happening or where they were taking her, and she was too afraid to ask. They reached the top of the staircase and entered the main corridor of the courthouse. The corridor, usually bustling with deputy justices and justices alike, was dark and completely empty. Bristol figured that it must have been past midnight, which made the whole situation even more frightening. What could be so important that it required her to be transported in the middle of the night? At the end of the dark corridor, Bristol spotted Brooks pacing in front of a pair of tall double doors. His face was bright red, and he angrily muttered to himself as he moved. "Brooks," she called out, "what's going on? And why are we in the courthouse so late?"
"Justice Olgrade found out who you are," he said. "The guard must have read my note and tipped him off, that bastard. Olgrade moved up your trial. He's trying to sentence you before Father has time to intervene."
"Wait, I don't understand," Bristol said. "When's the trial happening?"
"Now," Brooks said.
The guards pushed the double doors open and pulled Bristol into the courtroom, and her brother followed closely behind her. They were the first to arrive, and Bristol was overwhelmed by her first glimpse. It was easily the biggest room she had ever been in. It was surrounded by massive marble pillars and stretched into the darkness of a seemingly endless ceiling. Wooden risers wrapped around the courtroom with enough seats for thousands of witnesses. The only source of light came from 2 torches burning on either side of the justice's chair, which was raised on a tall platform at the front of the room. An enormous portrait of King Champion XIV was hung on the wall behind the platform, and the sovereign scowled down at the courtroom like a judgmental giant. The guards locked Bristol in the tall iron cage that stood at the very center of the room. The bars were so wide that she could barely see through them. Brooks took a seat at an empty table to the left of the cage, and Bristol assumed the empty table to her right was reserved for the prosecution deputy.
"Try to stay calm," her brother whispered, "and whatever you do, don't say anything, because it will only make things worse."
A small door behind the platform opened, and Justice Olgrade entered the courtroom from his private chambers. Even if he wasn't the justice overseeing her trial, just the sight of Olgrade made her chill. He was a skeletal man with a pitch-black beard and large sunken eyes that had pupils the size of pinpricks. His skin was the color of pea soup, and his long fingernails made his hands look like claws. Olgrade was followed by 4 guards, and to Bristol's horror, an executioner also emerged from the justice's private chambers carrying a large silver axe. Bristol turned to her brother, hoping to find reassurance in his eyes, but Brooks was just as alarmed as she was. The trial hadn't even started, and her fate seemed to be sealed. The justice climbed up the steps of the platform and took his seat. He glared down at Bristol with a twisted grin like a cat gawking at a mousetrap. With 3 loud bangs of his gavel, the proceeding began. And we're going to take a 2-second intermission because I'm going to go turn the bottle washer off because it's done, but it's still making noise for no reason. It's driving me nuts. I'll be right back. 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. Sip of coffee and we'll be back. Okay.
"The case of Bailey versus the Southern Kingdom shall commence," he announced. Your Honor, I'd like to remind you that it's illegal to begin a trial without a prosecution deputy," Brooks said. "And furthermore, it's completely unethical to have an executioner present in the courtroom before the defendant has even been sentenced." I'm aware of the law, defense deputy, the justice sneered. The prosecution deputy will be here momentarily. However, you, of all people, should not be lecturing me about ethics. It has recently come to my attention that you have made deliberate attempts to conceal information from this courtroom. There's a direct violation of your moral duties as deputy justice, and violators must be reprimanded. Justice Olegrade gave the guard a signal as they covered Bristol's cage with a sheet. Her limited view of the courtroom was now entirely obstructed. Your Honor, what's the purpose of this? Brooks objected. As I am sure you're aware, defense deputy, whenever a deputy justice is caught committing a violation in court, it is up to the presiding justice to apply an appropriate punishment, Olegrade explained. I've decided to teach you a lesson in the importance of transparency. Since you attempted to conceal the defendant's identity from me, her identity will be concealed for the rest of this trial. You are not to speak a word about who she is until after the prosecution deputy has recommended penalties. Let one word slip, and I will charge you with conspiracy to assist a criminal. Is that understood? Bristol didn't have to see the hatred beaming from her brother's eyes to know that it was there. Yes, Your Honor, Brooks said. I understand. Good, Olegrade said. Bring in the prosecution deputy. The double doors creaked open, and Bristol heard a new pair of footsteps enter the courtroom. Strangely, the prosecution deputy only made it halfway through the room before he stopped in his tracks. Brooks? A familiar voice asked. Barry? He gasped. You're the prosecution deputy? Bristol felt lightheaded, and she went weak in the knees. She had to grab the bars of her cage to prevent herself from sliding to the floor. Justice Olegrade was using her trial to get revenge on the Evergreen family, and it was even more malicious and cruel than she could have imagined. This is my first assignment, Barry said happily. Why didn't you tell me that you were the defense deputy on Bailey versus the Southern Kingdom? I was just trying to keep it quiet, Brooks said. Why is the defendant covered up? Barry asked. I'm not allowed to discuss it, Brooks said. Barry, listen to me. This trial isn't what it seems. That's quite enough, defense deputy. Justice Olegrade commanded, Thank you for joining us on such short notice, prosecution deputy. Now please, step forward and present the charges against the defendant. Barry took his place behind the table to Bristol's right, and she heard him move papers from his briefcase. He cleared his throat before reading them aloud. Your Honor, 3 men witnessed the defendant conjuring a spell from an open book in the private section of the Chariot Hills Library, he said. The first witness was the librarian, Mr. Patwise Woolsore, and the other 2 are of the King's Royal Guard, and all 3 have signed sworn statements of what they encountered. Given the credibility of the observers, the defendant has been charged with 1 count of trespassing, 1 count of female literacy, and 1 count of committing magic. I'll now relinquish the floor to the defense deputy. Given the substantial evidence and nature of the crimes, we will not waste time with any defense, Justice Olegrade said. Your Honor, I object, Brooks shouted. Overruled, and watch your tone, defense deputy, the justice warned. Now, moving on, what penalty does the prosecution recommend? This was the moment that Bristol had been dreading. With just 2 words, her own brother would either save her life or cement her demise. Her heart was pounding out of her chest, and she forgot to breathe as she waited to hear his answer. Your Honor, due to the number of felonies that were committed in such a short period of time, I believe that the defendant may commit more crimes if given the chance. We must remove all likelihood of that happening again, and furthermore, we must prevent all possibilities of the defendant harming innocent lives in the process. That's why I must recommend that you sentence them with a Barry, you've got to stop, Brooks shouted. Defense deputy, control yourself, Olegrade ordered. I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not. Gods, restrain and silence him immediately. Olegrade is hiding the defendant from you on purpose. Don't recommend the maximum penalty. Trust me, you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. Bristol could hear Brooks fighting off the guards as he tried to convince their brother. He grunted and choked as they pinned him down and they stuffed a cloth in his mouth. God, you're pathetic, Barry told his brother.
Your desire to sabotage me is so great that you're willing to make a complete fool of yourself in the courtroom, but I'm not as daft as you think I am, and I'm not gonna let you jeopardize my career. Father said I needed to show strength if I wanted the court to take me seriously, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Your Honor, the prosecution recommends the maximum penalty. After hearing her brother's recommendation, Bristol lost all feeling and collapsed onto the floor of the cage like a marionette whose strings were severed. Brooks screamed at the top of his lungs, but the cloth muffled his words. Then without further notice, I hereby sentence the defendant to death, Olagrade ruled. The execution shall take place immediately. Guards, please remove the defendant from the cage and position her for the executioner, but please first restrain the prosecution deputy. This may be unpleasant for him to watch. The guards seized Barry and tied his hands behind his back. He tried to resist them, but they were too strong. What's the meaning of this? He asked. Why am I being restrained? Unhand me at once. I've done nothing wrong. The sheet was removed from the cage, and with one glance at the blue eyes peeking out from inside, Barry realized who the defendant was. Bristol? He said in shock. But, what are you doing in there? You're supposed to be volunteering at the home for the hopeless? The executioner placed a thick wooden block on the floor just below the justice's platform. The guard dragged Bristol out of the cage and positioned her head on the block. The executioner hovered over her, and the reality of what Barry had done began to sink in. He became manic and he struggled against the restraints with all his might. No, he screamed. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know it was her. Justice Olagrade smiled and cackled at the trauma that he was causing the Evergreen family. The executioner raised his axe above Bristol's neck and practiced swinging it. From the floor, Bristol could see both of her brothers frantically trying to fight off the guards and holding them back. In that moment, she was almost grateful for Olagrade's vengeful tactics. If she was going to die, at least she would die looking at people that she loved. Bristol, I'm so sorry, Barry sobbed. Forgive me. Will you forgive me? It's gonna be all right, Barry, she whispered. This isn't your fault. This isn't your fault. Wham! The double doors suddenly swung open, and everyone jumped and turned to the back of the courtroom. Justice Evergreen stormed in with the rage of 100 men. Olagrade, stop this blasphemy at once, he demanded. I know, right, Mary? It's like literally, like, what is Chris doing to us? This is like gut-wrenching. Like, we hated Brooks a minute ago, but like now Brooks is like literally trying to save her life. Crazy. How dare you interrupt a trial in progress, Evergreen? Olagrade shouted. Leave this courtroom this instant or I'll have you removed. This isn't a trial, this is an atrocity, Justice Evergreen declared. The executioner glanced back and forth at the sparring justices, unsure of who to take orders from. Carry on, man, Olagrade yelled. This is my courtroom and Justice Evergreen has no authority here. As a matter of fact, I do, Justice Evergreen said, and he raised a scroll of parchment high into the air. I've just returned from High Justice Mountclair's home in the western countryside. He's granted me the power to commandeer this trial and overrule your sentencing. The justice unrolled the scroll so that everyone in the courtroom can see it. The document was an official order from High Justice Mountclair, and his large signature was featured at the bottom of it. This is an outrage, Olagrade exclaimed. Your daughter is a witch. She must be punished for her crimes. And the punishment she shall receive won't be from you, Justice Evergreen said. Montclair has sentenced her to live in a facility in the northwest plains of the Southern Kingdom until further notice. The facility, as I'm told, specializes in treating young women with my daughter's condition. There's a carriage outside waiting to transport her as we speak. In the meantime, the High Justice has ordered you to erase any mention of this trial from all records of the court. Justice Olagrade went silent as he contemplated his next move. When he realized how limited his options were, Olagrade became furious and banged his gavel until it broke into 2 pieces. Well, it appears Justice Evergreen has used his connections to manipulate the law, he told the room. At the moment, I have no choice but to follow the High Justice's orders. Guards, please take the Evergreen witch to the carriage outside. Before she had the chance to say goodbye to her brothers, the guards raised Bristol off the executioner's block and began dragging her from the courtroom. But Father, where am I going? She cried. What facility are they taking me to? Father! Despite her pleas, Justice Evergreen refused to answer his daughter's questions. He didn't even look her in the eye as the guards pulled her past him. Don't you dare address me as father, he said. You're no daughter of mine. That is a heavy chapter. That is a heavy chapter. Wow. Are you waking up, Angel? Oh, no, she looks like she's still asleep. Wow. Yeah, that was heavy. I know, it's still rough. It does, but like, I mean, it doesn't even matter if you know what goes on because you read it. Like, the way that he sets up the family dynamic and then does this, like, he really gets you good because he sets you up to dislike Brooks, but then like Brooks is kind of a hero, sort of, and the father too, right? Like, they might be jerks, but they love her, you know? Let's see. She looks like she's still asleep. She's wiggling a little, but she's still asleep. So we can try to read part of this chapter and see how far we get. And then when she wakes up, you know, it's fine, like whatever, right? It's been a very peaceful book club. So we're on a good run with this book. Like, we've gotten peaceful days with the majority of this book, which is really nice, you know? Chapter 6 is called The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women. Yikes. By sunrise, Bristol was already so far from Chariot Hills that she couldn't hear the morning cathedral bells. She was shackled at the back of a small carriage that traveled down a long and bumpy road through the northwest plains of the southern... Okay. Jen said, I think we all needed this. 100% we all needed this, and I think the universe knew that we needed it to be a peaceful read, and so my daughter has slept through the majority of this read, which, I mean, I don't know about you guys, like, I know we all love her, but, like, it's real nice to have quiet reading time, right? I mean, like, we needed this. We needed this book to get quiet time, right? I mean, we need to honor it, give it the honor it deserves. And she needs sleep anyway. It's not like I don't want to be with my daughter, but she's more pleasant when she's slept. That's all. And I think that's normal for everyone. Everyone's a little more pleasant when they've gotten good sleep, right? Right? So, anyway, let's keep going. We'll get through as much as we can of this chapter today. She was shackled in the back of a small carriage that now traveled down the long and bumpy road through the northwest plains of the southern kingdom. True to its name, there was absolutely nothing to see in the plains but the same flat earth stretched around them for miles. With every passing hour, the grassy land became drier and drier, and the sky became grayer and grayer, until the land blended into the sky with one dismal color. The driver stopped only rarely to feed the horses, and occasionally the guards let Bristol out of the carriage to relieve herself on the side of the road. The only food they gave her was a piece of stale bread, and Bristol was afraid to eat it because she didn't know how long she was supposed to ration it. The drivers said nothing about the estimated time of arrival, so as their second day of travel began, she started worrying their destination didn't even exist. She convinced herself that the carriage would eventually pull over and the drivers would abandon her in the middle of nowhere. Perhaps that was what her father and the High Justice's plan had been all along. In the late afternoon on their second day, Bristol finally spotted something in the distance that suggested there was civilization nearby. As the carriage moved closer to the object, she saw that it was a wooden sign that pointed down a new path. The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women. The carriage turned onto a dirt road heading in the direction that the sign pointed. Bristol was relieved to see that their destination existed, but as the facility appeared on the horizon, she realized being abandoned might have been a better option. Bristol had never laid eyes on such a miserable place, and just the sight of it sucked all remaining hope and happiness from her body. The Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women sat on the top of the only hill that Bristol had seen in the Northeast Plains. It was a 5-story wide building made of crumbling bricks, and the walls were severely weathered and cracked. All the windows were tiny and covered in bars, and the glass was mostly shattered. She's wiggling, but she seems to have slept through it. I think she's okay. Yeah, literally just like, shh. The way my niece reaches toward the TV when the world comes. Aw, she loves that song. Where was I? There were gaping holes in the thatched roof and a crooked chimney in the center that made the whole facility look like an enormous, rotting pumpkin. Gross. The building was surrounded by a few acres of parched land, and the property was bordered by a stone wall with sharp spikes along the top. Bristol's carriage stopped at the facility's gate, and the driver whistled for a hunchback gatekeeper who limped out from his small post to remove the barriers. Once the gate was open, the carriage continued down the path that snaked through the facility's grounds. Everywhere she looked, Bristol saw dozens of young women between the ages of 8 and 17 sprinkled across the property. Each girl wore a faded gray and black striped dress and a bandana to keep the hair out of their face, and a pair of oversized work boots. All the young women were pale and emaciated and shared the same expression of utter exhaustion, as if they hadn't had a decent meal or a good night's rest in years. It was a haunting sight, and Bristol wondered how long it would be until she, like the other girls, resembled a ghost of her former self. As we're reading this, does this remind anyone of all the places that Paris Hilton described in her memoir? You know, like all those correctional facilities that she was sent to? That's what I think of when I read this, is those places. You guys can tell me, you know, any of you who were here when we read Paris's memoir, I think that's what he was referencing. I could be wrong, but it sounds a lot like those places, you know? And conversion therapy places also, but like we recently read, not recently, I guess it's been almost a year since we read Paris's memoir, huh? Can you believe that? How time flies. It's been almost a year since we read her memoir, huh? That is crazy to think about. We read a lot, you guys. We read a lot of books. We're good. High five. High five to us. You know? I love us. Anyway, let's keep going. The young women were separated into groups performing various chores. Some fed chickens in an overcrowded coop, some milked malnourished cows in a small pen, and some pulled wilted vegetables from a wilting garden. However, Bristol didn't understand the point of the other activities she saw the girls performing. Some dug large holes in the ground with shovels, some moved heavy stones back and forth from one pile to another, and some carried heavy buckets of water around in circles. The girls showed no objections to the pointless exercises and completed their tasks almost mechanically. Bristol assumed that they were trying to avoid attention from the wardens who were patrolling them. The wardens wore dark uniforms and kept a hand on the whips dangling from their belts as they supervised the young women. As if the facility wasn't grim enough, a peculiar contraption in the middle of the property gave Bristol an uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. It appeared to be a large stone well, but instead of a water bucket hanging from its roof, there was a thick wooden board with 3 holes in it, the perfect size to fit around someone's wrist and neck. Whatever it was, Bristol hoped that she would avoid this mechanism during her time at the facility. The carriage stopped at the building's entrance, and the driver and guards pulled Bristol out of the back. She shrieked because the air was much colder than she had anticipated. The front doors opened from the inside, and the rusty hinges screeched like an animal in pain, and a man and woman stepped out to greet the newcomers. The man was short, and he was shaped like an upside-down pear. He had an incredibly wide head and a very thick neck, and a torso that narrowed as it lowered to his tiny waist. He was a sharp dresser who wore a red bow tie with a blue suit that was perfectly tailored to his awkward measurements. His mouth was curled into a devious grin that never faded. The woman beside him was shaped like a cucumber. She was almost twice... I'm so sorry. It's an amazing description. Chris really knows how to get me. He doesn't want me to be able to read without laughing. Like, this is a really sad moment, and he just described someone as a cucumber. Sorry. The woman beside him was shaped like a cucumber. She was almost twice as tall as him, and she had the exact same width from head to toe. She looked more conservative than the man and wore a black dress with a high, lacy collar. A permanent frown was frozen on her face like she had never laughed in her entire life. Maybe help you? Sorry, that's not right, because he's about to describe the voice. May we help you? The man asked in a deep and raspy voice. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Edgar, the administrators of this facility? The driver asked. Yes, that's us, the woman said in a sharp and nasally voice. By order of the High Justice Mountclair of Chariot Hills, Miss Bristol Lynn Evergreen has been sentenced to live at your facility until further notice. One of the guards notified them. He handed the man a scroll with the official order in writing. Mr. Edgar read over the document and then eyed Bristol like he had won a prize. My, he said. Miss Evergreen must have done something very naughty for a High Justice to have sentenced her here personally. Of course, we would be delighted to have her join us. Well, then she's all yours, the driver said, and the guards unlocked Bristol's shackles and shoved her toward the administrators. Without missing a beat, the guards and the driver returned to the carriage and raced away from the facility. Mr. and Mrs. Edgar looked Bristol up and down like two dogs inspecting a snake.
Let me be the first to warn you, dearie, that this is a house of the Lord, Mrs. Edgar said in a spiteful tone. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave your debauchery at the door.
You must be tired and hungry from your journey, Mr. Edgar said in a friendly manner that Bristol didn't trust. You're just in luck. It's nearly dinner time. Come inside and we'll get you changed into something more appropriate. Mr. Edgar placed a hand on the back of Bristol's neck, and the couple escorted her inside. The interior of the Bootstrap Correctional Facility was just as cold and battered as the outside. The floor was made of rotting wood planks, and the ceiling was stained from leaks. The walls were covered in dents and scrapes, and the administrators moved Bristol down a corridor and through a large archway into a spacious dining hall. The dining hall had 3 long tables that stretched the entire length of the room. A small table at the front was for facility members. More young women in faded gray and black striped dresses were seated along the tables, hard at work sewing pieces of leather boots together. And just like the girls outside, the young women in the dining hall were gaunt, and they looked fatigued. Their fingertips were bruised and bleeding, and they were being forced to work with dull needles. Additionally, the wardens paced the hall as they inspected the girls' work, and they backhanded some of the young women who weren't sewing fast enough for their satisfaction. At the front of the room, hanging above a smaller table, was an enormous banner with a message that made Bristol's blood boil. And here's what it looks like for those of you who'd like to see. It says, and good girls do what they're told. They never ask questions. Good girls finish their work. They never take breaks. Good girls keep their heads down. They never look for trouble. Good girls are always truthful. They never tell lies. Good girls know their place. They never show disrespect. Good girls are grateful. They never want more. I'm gonna need a sip of coffee to get through that one, my friends. That's gonna be a hard one for me. Okay. And on that note, before Bristol could comment on the infuriating message, the administrators pushed her up a rickety staircase at the back of the dining hall. Mrs. Edgar unlocked a heavy barred door, and the couple moved Bristol into their office at the top of the stairs. Unlike the rest of the facility, the Edgars' office was very elegant. It had carpeted floors and a crystal chandelier. The walls were painted with murals of beautiful landscapes. The office had large windows that peered into the dining hall and the facility's grounds. It was a perfect place to spy on the young women as they worked. Mr. Edgar took a seat in the leather chair behind the cherry wood desk. Mrs. Edgar pulled Bristol behind a privacy screen in the corner of the office and had her remove the clothes and shoes that she arrived in. She tossed Bristol's things into a wastebasket and crossed to a bulky wardrobe on the other side of the room. The woman opened the drawer and selected a faded gray and black striped dress and a bandana, as well as a pair of work boots. Here, she said, and handed the items to Bristol. Get dressed. Bristol had nothing on her but her undergarments and was freezing, so she put the new clothes on as fast as she could. Unfortunately, the uniform wasn't nearly as warm as her old clothes, and Bristol shivered in the cold room. Ma'am, may I please have a sweater? She asked. Does this look like a boutique? Mrs. Edgar snapped.
The cold is good for you. It makes you seek the warmth of the Lord.
She sat Bristol in the chair across from her husband. His devilish grin grew wide as he watched Bristol shiver, and his double chin turned into 4 chins. Miss Evergreen, let me officially welcome you to the Bootstrap Correctional Facility for Troubled Young Women, Mr. Edgar said. Do you know why the High Justice has placed you in our care? They say you're supposed to cure me, Bristol said. Indeed, he said. You see, there's something inside you that shouldn't be there. What may seem like a talent or a gift is actually an illness that must be remedied immediately. My wife and I created this facility so we could help girls with your condition. With some hard work and prayer, we'll root out all the unnatural qualities you possess, and nothing will prevent you from being a respectable wife and mother one day. I don't understand how manual labor and prayer can cure anyone, she said. Mr. Edgar let out a low and rattling laugh and shook his head. Our methods may seem tedious and grueling, but they're the most effective tools for treatment, he explained. You're infected with a horrible disease. It's a sickness of the spirit that the Lord himself opposes. It's going to take time and effort to destroy it. However, with dedication and discipline, we can crush the very source of your symptoms. Our facility will starve the evil from your soul and pump the darkness from your heart, drain the wickedness from your mind. Bristol knew it was in her best interest to stay silent and just nod, but every word out of Mr. Edgar's mouth infuriated her more than the last. Mr. Edgar, you agree that the Lord is all-knowing, all-powerful, and the sole creator of all existence, correct? She asked. Without question, Mr. Edgar replied. Then why would the Lord create magic if he hates it so much? She asked. It's a little counterproductive, don't you think? Mr. Edgar went quiet, and it took him a few moments to answer her. To test the loyalty of your soul, of course, he declared. The Lord wants to separate the people who seek salvation from the people who surrender to sin. By willingly making sacrifices to overcome your condition, you're proving your devotion to the Lord and his beloved southern kingdom. But if the Lord wants to identify those who are willing to overcome magic, aren't you interfering by forcing girls to overcome it? She's so good. I love Bristol so much. She speaks to my very soul, literally. She's so great. Her second question was even more befuddling than the first. Mr. Edgar became flustered and his cheeks turned the same color as his bow tie. His eyes darted between Bristol and his wife as he composed a response. Of course not, he replied. Magic is an unholy manipulation of nature, and no one should manipulate the Lord's beautiful world but the Lord himself. He smiles upon the people who try to stop such abominations. I know, it was me too, Jen. They did not like my questions either. I was totally this girl. I was like, well, but you said... And they were like, they did not like that. When I was in like Bible classes, oh, they were mad at me. They did not like me. But you're trying to manipulate me, so isn't that also an abomination? Bristol asked. Mr. and Mrs. Edgar gasped. They had never been accused of such a thing. Bristol knew that she should stop while she was ahead, but she really couldn't stomach any more hypocrisy. She was going to speak her mind, whether the administrators liked it or not. How dare you? Mr. Edgar exclaimed. My wife and I have devoted our lives to the Lord's work. But what if you're wrong about the Lord? She argued. What if the Lord's much kinder and more loving than you're giving him credit for? What if the Lord invented magic so that people could help each other and enrich their own lives? What if the Lord thinks that you're the unholy ones for abusing people and make them to believe that their existence is a whack? Mrs. Edgar slapped Bristol so hard that her head jerked in a different direction. You disrespectful little beast, Mrs. Edgar said. You will bite your tongue or I'll have it removed. Is that understood? Bristol nodded as blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. Mr. Edgar leaned back in his chair and stared at Bristol like she was a wild animal he was excited to tame. You have a long road ahead of you, Miss Evergreen, he said. I'm looking forward to watching your progress. And then a gong sounded throughout the facility. Ah, time for dinner, Mr. Edgar said. You may join the girls in the dining hall. Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's going to be a very, very long day for you. Mrs. Edgar raised Bristol to her feet and walked her to the door, and then gave her a shove on her way down the rickety staircase. Whew. Someone's still asleep, but we're past our time, so we'll finish this chapter tomorrow. But we got a lot of really good reading done today. I don't want to keep going because I'm afraid she's going to wake up because she's wiggling, and I know some good stuff is coming, and I don't want to have to stop in the middle of the next scene. And since it's a new scene, we'll just pause. Bristol's amazing. I know, right, Sloth? I forgot too. I actually completely forgot. I completely forgot. A page. Great. Thank you, Tiffany. We're on page 134. 134. And we'll pick it up tomorrow, and we will see what happens at dinner to Miss Bristol. All right. I'll see you later.